Needless to say, in our postmodern, politically correct society, the preaching of a place of eternal punishment is not a popular subject. Hell is seldom mentioned from modern pulpits or taught in religious Bible schools or seminaries anymore, and has all but disappeared from the religious mainstream. In fact, within the emergent church, there are leaders like, for example, Rob Bell and Brian McLaren, who deny even the existence of an eternal hell. The emergent church is a dangerous movement that takes its name from the idea that as the culture changes, the church must change in response. Adding to the danger is the fact that you won't see a sign saying we are the first church of the emergent or the emergent assembly of God, but they are all around us. The emergent church movement falls into line with basic postmodernist thinking. It is about experience over reason. It is subjectivity over objectivity, spirituality over religion, images over words, outward over inward, feelings over truth. Postmodernism can be thought of as a disillusion of cold, hard fact in favor of warm, fuzzy subjectivity. And the emergent church movement can be thought of in the same way. Hence, the thought of hell doesn't make us feel all warm and fuzzy. Therefore, the claim is that the only hell that one will experience is the hell they experience here on this earth. But is that what Jesus taught? The most popular preacher of our day, a product of this postmodern society, Joel Osteen, while not denying hell's existence, openly states he never talks about it. His positive message appeals to this postmodern culture as well. His response to why he doesn't preach on hell is, and I quote, "Most people are beaten down enough by life. They already feel guilty enough." And I'm sure this is what makes him so popular. And I must confess, I don't enjoy, not for one moment, do I enjoy preaching about hell, or for that matter, people's sin. And most certainly I don't like to make people feel uncomfortable. If you think that of me, you don't know me. It's much easier to ignore it, but my mandate won't allow me to do that. I struggle with it. When God lays it upon my heart as He did this week, I'm torn, even hoping I can go in another direction. I start feeling all kinds of emotions, but it all comes down to this. Do I love God enough to obey Him? And do I love you enough to tell you the truth regardless of what this postmodern society thinks of it? You say, "Pastor, why do you have to mention names like Joel Osteen?" Well, I'd like to have a talk with him, and I'm serious. It seems his view is that feelings of guilt in this life are a worse fate than going to hell for eternity. Think of that. I ask you, who would you rather hear? Someone who will make you feel comfortable, give you some warm fuzzies right now in this life? Or someone who will warn you of an eternal fate that lasts forever and forever? As for me, give me the truth. I can take it. I'm not a snowflake. Because We are the feel-good generation. A lot of preachers have chosen to avoid talking about hell, afraid that people will quit coming to their church. One preacher said, my congregation wouldn't like it. And I have to ask, what kind of preacher is that? Does he really care about your soul? That's my question. Secondly, God didn't call the preacher to please the congregation by preaching what they want to hear. He called us to preach what men need to hear. That's a true preacher of the gospel. One misguided preacher said hell should not be mentioned because it frightens people. If that's the case, someone should have told Jesus. There are over 162 references in the New Testament alone which warn of hell, and over 70 of those references were uttered by our Lord Jesus Christ himself. There are 1,850 verses in the New Testament that contain Jesus speaking. In 13% of those verses, Jesus speaks regarding eternal judgment and hell. Jesus spoke more about hell than he did heaven. Why? He wanted to warn people whom he loved not to go there. Listen to some of the things he says about hell. Matthew 18 verse 8 says, wherefore if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire. And if thy eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hell fire. To the hypocritical religious leaders of Jesus' day, he says in Matthew 23, verse 33, ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? If anybody ever thinks I preach hard, I don't even hold a candle to Jesus. Regarding the unprofitable servant in Matthew 25 verse 30, and cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 25 verse 41, then shall he say also to them on the right, on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. Can I just mention this? God prepared hell for the devil and his angels, not for us. Why did Jesus speak so plainly? Because it is true. Christ is the faithful and true witness. He said to Pilate, everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. He is truth, and it is impossible for God to lie. He's not lying about hell. Now suppose I never mention hell again. Would it make it any less true? Would it make it any less tolerable? Oh, my friend, it is true. It is true. It is all true. And we cannot but mention it. The second reason Jesus spoke so much of hell is he loves sinners, and love will always warn of danger. I like to use this illustration. If I'm waving the flashlight on a dark, foggy, rainy night to warn you there's a bridge out ahead, I'm not your enemy. I'm your friend. The best friends are those who do not flatter. And Jesus did not flatter. He didn't tell people what they wanted to hear or worry that they might leave his church. Indeed, most of them did quit following him because he told the truth. But love compelled him to warn sinners to flee from the wrath to come. In Luke 16, our morning text, Jesus gives us a preview of hell. He pulls back the curtain of eternity, and he gives us a glimpse so that we will be forewarned not to go to that place. Come with me this morning and see. It says in verse 19, there was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus which was laid at his gate full of sores, and desired to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. Before we consider the story at hand, it must be affirmed that the rich man did not go to hell because he was rich. And Lazarus did not go to Abraham's bosom because he was poor. There are multitudes of one-time rich people in heaven, just as there are myriads of one-time poor people in hell. Neither affluence nor poverty determines one's eternal state. It is our relationship with Christ alone that decides eternal bliss or eternal woe. Of that I want to be clear. And I want to draw a contrast today between these two men in their lives. Here is a man who is wealthy, living in luxury, enjoying the fineries of life. He is the rich man. He was clothed with purple and fine linen. In the East, this spoke of his abounding wealth. Even the word gate, where the beggar lay, is the Greek word poulon, which means a gate full of artistry and exquisite beauty. The revealing word here is that this rich man fared sumptuously every day. His lifestyle was flamboyant. It's interesting to note that he is not described as being guilty of some monstrous, gross sin, nor was he some kind of evil member of society. He was not an oppressor of the poor. In fact, he allowed Lazarus to sit at his gate begging alms. He allowed that to happen. But he went to hell because he lived for himself. He forgot that he was God's trustee. His wealth and influence should have been used for God's glory, for the benefit of his fellow man. Living for self is the sin that brought eternal misery, not his wealth. His selfishness, not his sensuality. Indeed, no vices, no crimes were laid at his charge, to his charge. On the other hand, Lazarus, the beggar, he was poor. He was destitute. The rich man was clothed in purple and fine linen, the beggar in rags. The rich man lived in a mansion. The beggar was laid at the gate of the mansion. The rich man had a healthy body. The beggar had a body full of sores. The rich man fared sumptuously every day. Oh, the beggar, he lived on the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. The rich man had a physician to care for him. The beggar had the dogs come and lick his sores. It says in verse 22, it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. In this story, these two men die. Death is something we don't like to talk about. The New Age has tried to seduce us with the promises of reincarnation and astral projection and sound travel. Yet the Bible says in Hebrews 9:27, and it's appointed to man once to die, but after this, the judgment. You see, we are all terminal. Not a very exciting, uplifting message today, is it? Rich and poor die alike. Death is the great equalizer. When the tag is on the toe, it doesn't matter whether one was rich or whether they were poor, because we can't take anything with us. As it has been said, I've never seen a U-Haul following a hearse. All the money that the rich man had could not buy off the pale horse rider when he approached the beautiful gate. As we saw the contrast in the lives of these two men, we now see the contrast in their death. First, the beggar in verse 22 dies. He just says he dies. It's interesting. It just says he dies. And it came to pass in verse 22 that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died, but it says this, and was buried. Nothing is said of the beggar's burial. It's interesting, G. Campbell Morgan says beggars of the type of Lazarus were not buried. They would take the dead body to a place called Tophet or Gehenna, where there was a refuse heap of fire, and throw the body in it. That was a known fact of that time. The very fact that it doesn't say that he was buried leads us to believe this was true. However, the Bible does say that the angels came and carried away his soul to paradise. The rich man was very different. It says he was buried. He probably had a stately burial with hired mourners and all the pageantry money could buy. His obituary was no doubt probably, I would say, a full page, yet he had no angelic escort. According to the story, he went straight to hell. No purgatory. His money could not hold off death or guarantee happiness beyond this life. Jesus said in Mark 8:36, "For what would it profit a man if he gained the whole world and would lose his own soul? Or what would a man give in exchange for his soul?" Now you can do the figuring. Is there anything more valuable than our soul? I mean, if you think of it, 1,000,000,000,000,000 trillion years from now, your soul will be alive somewhere in eternity. When you breathe your last breath, you're going to walk in this dimension called eternity. And God, in Mark 8, puts the scales of eternity before us, and he puts the treasures and the pleasures of the world on one side, and on the other side, the soul, just one soul of one man. And it's hands down, the soul is of much more value. Why? Because it lives forever. A tombstone in a 100-year-old cemetery bears this verse. "Pause, stranger, when you pass me by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you will be. So prepare for death and follow me." And an unknown visitor added these lines, "To follow you, I'm not content until I know which way you went." Now Jesus pulls back the curtain and he lets us see beyond eternity, beyond into eternity, I should say. We've seen the contrast in life and in death. Let's look at the contrast in eternity. It says in verse 25, "But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted. Thou art tormented." The rich man is tormented. Lazarus is comforted. It's quite a contrast. Verse 23 says, "And in hell he lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame." You see, hell is a place of considerable pain. And notice the word torments is in the plural, signifying many and varied types of torment. Verse 30 of Matthew chapter 25 says, "And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Gnashing means grinding. It is used of the growl of a lion, snarling, growling with a sense of even biting. Verse 23, 27, and 28 reveal that hell is a place of consciousnness. It says in verse 23, "And in hell he lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom." Verse 27 and 28, "Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send into my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment." So there is no soul sleep taught here, no annihilation being taught. Hell is a place of consciousness. The rich man saw Lazarus and Abraham, and he knew, he fully realized his brothers were lost. Verse 24 shows there is no mercy in hell. It says, "And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame." Only on this side of the grave can you find mercy. Chapter 25 of Matthew, verse 41 says, "Then shall ye also say unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire." Everlasting fire. Mark 9:48, Jesus speaks of hell as a place, he says, "Where the worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched." It is everlasting. lasting. Verse 25 shows us there will be awful remorse in hell. It says, but Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receiveth thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things. But now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. He remembers a lifetime of wasted opportunities. Can I tell you, as much as I don't want anybody to ever go there, your memory will haunt you in hell. You'll remember every gospel message you ever heard and spurned. You'll remember the times you said tomorrow or later, and later it's come, and now it's too late. Notice the word now. This is the all-important word. It speaks of the time after death. What will your status be in the future now? Comfort or torment? Verse 26 tells us there's no second chances in hell. It says, and beside all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. The fate will be sealed. There will be no reprieve. Verse 27 and 28, we find something. As I start to wrap this up, something that's in hell. Something in hell that's lacking in the church today. Prayer is in hell, and concern is there. It says in verse 27, then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. The rich man is praying. God help us, but if you would go to hell, you'll never ever be able to attend another church service like this. You would never hear another gospel sermon, never another gospel song. But the one thing you will do is you will pray. There's something more here. In hell, the rich man is concerned. I have to ask, are we? Perhaps the lack of preaching on hell has caused us to lose the concern for souls. I fear many Christians don't really believe with a deep down conviction in their heart that there really is a hell. Or if they do believe, they're afraid to share the gospel because they might offend. Oh, how selfish. How can a Christian believe there is a hell and not witness and never shed a tear over the lost? Tell me, how can this be? Have you been poisoned by this culture? The emerging church that says, well, God won't send people to hell because they believe in Muhammad or Buddha instead of Jesus. Or worse, hell's not real. The only hell is here on this earth, or it'll just all be over like that. Or like the universalists, we believe everybody will ultimately be right with God. Let me tell you, friend, don't drink the Kool-Aid. John Lennon used to sing his smash hit song, Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven, he says. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Well, you can imagine that all you would like to. You can believe Lennon if you would like to. But imagine what Jesus said is right. Imagine that. Jonathan Edwards imagined in his sermon, one of the greatest sermons ever preached. You don't hear these kind of sermons nowadays. It won't be accepted The sermon was called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. In it, he describes the hell awaiting impenitent sinners when he says, and I quote, "The devil is waiting for them. Hell is gaping for them. The flames gather and flash around them and would fain lay hold on them and swallow them up." He would go on to describe the sinners being held over the pit of hell as one holds a spider over an open flame. Imagine that, my friend. Imagine that there is a hell, because there is a hell. But the good news is you don't have to go there. You don't have to go there. And I could preach to you the warm, fuzzy stuff. But if I believe there is a hell, and I do, I could not say I love you. So, well, Pastor, what must I do to go to heaven? All you have to do is repent and believe the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Pastor, what must I do to go to hell? Here's the shocking answer: nothing. Nothing at all. If you do nothing about your soul, hell will be your destiny. Do nothing. Just simply do nothing and be lost. Trust Christ and be saved. May all who hear these words this day, my prayer is, be rescued from the wrath to come, and by the grace of God arrive one day safely in heaven. And may we who are saved be concerned and pray for those who are not.